All right, I've turned recording on. We're at 6:29, so we're going to get started in just a moment. Peggy, if you will unmute yourself, I'm going to start out with some introductions and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself as well as co-host. There you go. Great. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Jump. I can't do that. She has me on.
All right, everybody should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
All right. And we're going to get started in just a moment here. People went here.
Do that.
Appreciate doing fix this for you. You made it. I like that.
I'm a co-host right now, James.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jane Patterson. I'm the president of the Baton Rouge Audubon Society, and we are co-presenting this presentation tonight with LSU Hilltop Arboretum. I have Peggy Davis Coates on the line with us tonight. Peggy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, hello everyone. It's Peggy from Hilltop, and it's such a pleasure to be a part of this program with Jane. We've worked behind the scene, especially on my part, to be able to bring to Baton Rouge a really beautiful selection of the many trees, shrubs, and perennials that Jane is going to talk about tonight that will be available for sale tomorrow. So it's really been just a wonderful thing that we could do this together. So I really thank you, Jane, and I'm really looking forward to your talk. I know it's going to give us all some new ideas and wonderful lessons that we can bring back to our gardens.
I certainly hope so. That is absolutely our intent. So just as far as housekeeping goes, I have muted everybody. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or we'll unmute folks at the end or ask people to unmute themselves at the end so that you can ask your questions. So just make notes and keep track of any questions that you might have, and we'll answer those at the end. We're scheduled to go until 8 o'clock. I haven't practiced this presentation, so I don't know if I'm going to keep to my timeline or not, but I will do my best. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So our focus tonight is on using native plants to attract birds. Many of us love to watch our birds in our yards, and right now, especially with the pandemic, we're spending so much time at home, and bird watching has become a whole new activity for a lot of people. People are discovering it for the first time, and gardening as well. And gardening is one of those industries that's done really well through the last few months. When we think of attracting birds, we kind of automatically think about putting out bird feeders. And feeders absolutely do work. They bring the birds close to us so that we can see them and enjoy them up close. But feeders are like McDonald's, if you will. They're fast food as opposed to Mother Nature's home cooking. And birds really do prefer nature's bounty. So if there are times when you don't see birds at your feeders, like right now, actually in the fall, it's probably because they're out there eating the natural food, which actually is much better for them than what we're providing in our feeders. So it's not that they're gone; it's that they're out enjoying the food in nature. So fortunately, birds are not relying on us for food. They are supplementing their natural selection of food with what's in our feeders. But they need Mother Nature to provide the diversity of food in order to thrive. And it's just a truth that as human population continues to expand at an exponential rate, that habitat for birds and other wild critters is just shrinking. Habitat loss is certainly one of the leading causes for loss of bird populations. So with that, it really is, it's a truth that your yard absolutely matters. It's not just about making things pretty. It's a life and death conversation when it comes to the animals that share our spaces. We tend to think of nature as something that's out there somewhere that we have to go to visit. But nature is in our own backyards, and the more that we can do to support nature, the better it will be for everyone. We get into this. Landscaping has become a product of ornamentation. So certainly this yard would win a Homeowners Association award. When we look at the variety of plants that are provided here, they're really focused on ornamentation and not for their role in the ecosystem and in the food web. This is a quote from Dr. Doug Tallamy. He says that we've reduced our plants, our landscaping to ornamentation. It's most important to fit in with the neighbors, and that's the sad state of affairs, unfortunately. If you're not familiar with Doug Tallamy, he's a professor of entomology. He focuses on insects, actually, at the University of Delaware. He's written a couple of books, co-wrote The Living Landscape with Rick Dark, and then wrote Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope, that really focuses in on this, this particular topic about gardening with native plants to support our food webs. And he has some really interesting ideas. I strongly recommend these books. You can also find his presentations on YouTube pretty much in their entirety. And he's a very engaging speaker as well. So if you're not familiar with his work, I do recommend that. Our traditional landscaping generally has meant that we remove everything that used to be there, and we put back a lot of grass and a few ornamentals, most of which are not native to North America. We even have to, we scrape away the soil and we put garden soil back on. So it's completely antithesis of naturescaping. Naturescaping is more about selecting plants that go with the place instead of changing the place for the plant. We create this self-sustaining landscape that can be lower maintenance. It is absolutely not no maintenance, but these landscapes then function like nature. They become part of these ecological systems that have existed for millennia. Many of the plants that we buy in the nursery have been bred strictly for ornamentation. Our insects don't even recognize them as food. They've been cultivated and hybridized. We look here at this annual red salvia with the giant flowers, certainly created as an ornament. It has no nectar for hummingbirds versus the native Salvia Coxenia, fire sage. The flowers smaller, but Mother Nature puts out new flowers every single day full of nectar, and hummingbirds absolutely love these flowers. This time we rethink our plant choices and start looking at how to use plants that are native to our area so they can provide more choices to support birds and other wildlife. Native birds need native plants and the insects that co-evolve with them over millennia. There's another quote from Dr. Tallamy. 96% of all terrestrial bird species in North America feed insects to their young. And as an example in his book, he talked about one clutch of chickadees, so a nest full of babies that was fed over 9,000 insects over the 2-week period in their nest by their parents. That's a lot of insect life to support just one clutch of chickadees. As a personal experience, I had a bird box on my porch a few years back, and I had these Carolina wrens that moved in. They raised 4 babies. I put up a bird camera and watched them as they went through this process. They would visit this nest over 200 times a day to feed these babies. I love that one. That huge insect that the baby couldn't quite get. So I watched this whole process for a couple of weeks. These babies fledged, but so over each day, the parents were going back and forth to this nest hundreds of times a day, feeding insects. So if you look at a chickadee that weighs 1/3 of an ounce, compare that to a Carolina wren that weighs 1/2 ounce, or a cardinal that weighs 1.5 ounces. So 6 times as much, 5 or 6 times as much as a chickadee, or a blue jay that weighs a whopping 3 ounces, 9 times as much as a chickadee. So if a clutch of chickadees requires over 9,000 insects, how many insects does it take to raise a nest of wrens or cardinals or blue jays? And then you multiply that out, and you can see how essential it is that insects are a part of our landscapes. Caterpillars, Dr. Talamy found, are the absolute go-to food for birds. They're soft and squishy. They're packed with protein, so they are the perfect baby food. Our native oak trees support more than 550 different species of butterflies and moths. Non-native trees, and his example was a ginkgo tree, may not host any insects through their life cycle. So our Chinese tallow, for example, not without its benefits to wildlife, but it is not a host to insects. So it takes up space that our natives may be able to use, and doesn't provide any hosting to insects. As a gardener, this does take some rethinking. As an ornamental gardener, we're taught to worry about the holes in the leaves, and we see something chewing on or crawling on our plants. Our first instinct is to spray or to sprinkle something to get rid of it. And so we kind of have to turn that around and welcome the insects that are in our yard and realize that they're our allies and not our enemies. Native plants are often hardier than non-native ornamentals, and really do require fewer sprays and pesticides and fertilizers, and really makes your job as a gardener easier, which is something in itself. We can have both the beauty and the function. I think this is really critical. So here's an oak tree doing everything that an oak tree is supposed to do. It has the beautiful green color, it provides shade, it makes a grand statement in the landscape. It certainly is aesthetically pleasing. If we look closely at this oak tree, we might in fact see that the leaves have holes in them, which means that there are insects that are using this plant, and then there are birds that are going after the insects that are on this tree, like the cedar waxwing. So if you look very close, you can see the damage, but you also see a tree that is absolutely teeming with life. And that is certainly not to say that our natives cannot be ornamental. Everyone is familiar with our iconic live oak trees. We have trees that, as far as aesthetics are concerned, provide that perfect tree shape, just the classic conical shape, and an American holly. And then if the tree is a female, it's covered in berries at certain times and providing tons of food for thrushes like this American robin. So the truth is that plant diversity equals bird diversity. And in Dr. Talamy's research, he found that yards that increased their use of native plants also increased the likelihood that birds such as wood thrushes, towhees, veeries would exist in these yards as well. And the research showed that with just 30% of your yard landscaped in native plants, birds are able to sustain life, basically. Instead of a sink, you become able to reproduce and live in those spaces. In my yard, over 4 years in Ponchatoula, I've logged 101 species of birds in my yard. 26 of these have been birds that simply flew over. The great bald eagle, swallowtail kite, snowy egret, for example. 7 different of these bird species were at feeders in my yard, but almost half were simply using the trees and shrubs, perhaps as perches, perhaps as nesting, and some, like this yellow-breasted chat, that would never have visited my yard normally with just ornamental plants, was in my yard eating elderberries right in my backyard. I have a vitex, a chase tree that is declining, and the birds planted an elderberry in the middle of it, and I let it grow up in the middle of that vitex, and it produced hundreds of berries, and I saw all sorts of birds eating them, including this wonderful visitor. You want warblers in your yard? You know, for birders, these are kind of the crown jewels of the bird world. They're colorful, they're just absolutely gorgeous. And all of these are migrants. They do not nest here in Louisiana. So they spend the winters in Central or South America. They're going to breed way north in the boreal forest, and they just pass through. If you want to see these birds in your yard, you've got to have something for them here, and that would be insects. So I've documented 12 species of warblers in my yard, and they're all going to be in the plants looking for insects. So our yards become critical stopover habitat for these migrating birds. You can find some native plants that support insects. So Dr. Tallamy partnered with the National Wildlife Federation to create this native plant finder website where you can go and put in your zip code, and it will produce a list of plants that are appropriate to your area that are hosts for different types of insects, which are beautiful in their own right, of course. Butterflies and moths are endlessly fascinating, but their caterpillars, their larvae, can also provide food for our birds. And as far as native fruits, Bill Fontenot did a study back in the 90s. This report was published in 1998, but is still absolutely relevant today, where he asked birders across the state to report to him when they actually observed birds eating fruit. And he documented this over a number of years and put it into a report. It was, the results were published in the Journal of Louisiana Ornithology back in 98, but the Orleans Audubon Society has now reformatted this report. And they list it by plant. It tells when the plant goes into fruit, provides fruits, gives some description about how the plant grows, and then also lists the birds that have currently been documented eating the fruits of these plants. You can go to the Orleans Audubon website. I have the link there under their Gardening for Wildlife link to find this report. I also have this as a PDF under files on our Facebook group, Plants for Birds in Louisiana, as a downloadable PDF. So that's an important resource for you. And fruits can be available, you know, we tend to kind of think of fruit in the summer, but fruits can be available year round. The sugarberry, hackberry, the fruit actually comes out in the late summer, but it can persist all the way through the fall into the spring. Southern magnolia, fruits in the summertime, red mulberry in the spring, rough-leaf dogwood in the late summer, and if it's not all eaten, it can persist into the fall. The ilex, the hollies tend to fruit and have the fruit persist into the winter. As far as providing seeds, you know, it's not just about putting out sunflower seed in our feeders. We can provide plants like these American elm trees that will provide thousands of seeds for birds to eat. This is an American goldfinch feasting on elm seeds at the LSU Ag Center Hammond Research Station here in Tangipahoa Parish. Of course, we're familiar with most trees that provide seeds. Here are just a few there are certainly many more. Offering flowers is always a great option. Gardeners especially love flowers for the ornamentation. Here are 3 examples of wonderful natives that provide nectar for hummingbirds. We have trumpet creeper, coral honeysuckle, and then Turks Cap, which hummingbirds all love. Other birds will also eat flowers. There's an orange-crowned warbler that is feasting on the giant Turks Cap, as well as the orioles have a sweet tooth as well. There's one on coral bean or mamoon. And, you know, when we think about flowers, it's not just the ornamental plants. Here's a willow tree in full bloom in the spring. So there are probably millions of flowers on this one plant, or certainly in a grove of willows, and an orange-crowned warbler eating the blossoms. So you'll find many birds do that as well. Even the tender foliage. So the birds need their greens. They might need their insects for protein, but they need their greens as well. And you'll find lots of birds will nibble on the tender foliage as it emerges in the spring. And of course, birds depend on our trees, our shrubs, our other plants for nesting, for roosting, for hiding from predators, for sitting and preening after they've had a bath, any of those things as well. The National Audubon Society has created has an initiative currently called Plants for Birds. If you visit the website audubon.org/plantsforbirds, you can put your zip code in. This is similar to the National Wildlife Federation's page, but this is particularly focused on birds. So if you put your zip code in, it'll create a downloadable list of plants that will be recommended for your area. And it talks about, gives us a small short blurb about the plant, its growth habits and requirements, and also the birds that it might support. So that can be very useful when you're trying to figure out what native plants to add to your yard. National Audubon has declared that they'd like folks to add 1 million native plants to North America. One of the ways to promote this is to donate and get this beautiful sign that you can hang in your yard. Yes, you're essentially paying for the sign, but what you're doing, so you're contributing to Audubon, but you're also putting out a visible talking point that you can then discuss with your neighbors and your friends when they see that you're providing plants for birds, and it becomes a great conversation starter so that you can promote this idea with other people as well. You know, because if everybody in your neighborhood starts doing this, imagine the effect that this would have over time, which is exactly what Dr. Chalmers talks about. Another great local reference, if you are not familiar with it already, is Bill Fontenot's book on native gardening in the South, because he talks specifically about plants in South Louisiana. It can be very helpful for, you know, boots on the ground experience with plants in our area. And sometimes when we're thinking about plants, it's not just the food value, it's also shelter and nesting opportunities. So snags are a wonderful habitat for birds. As a tree declines, it provides habitat for woodpeckers and other cavity nesters. This probably a water oak tree, it's hard to tell at this point, is now home to several different species of vines that are growing up it, but it's also home to a family of barred owls that has moved into the cavity. So that kind of support is also necessary. And I mean, who would not want these babies in your yard? This is a pair of barred owls. Basically telling mom and daddy that it's time for lunch, even though it's so they're just going to sit there, big fuzzy cotton balls, and cry for food.
So sweet.
If you want woodpeckers, those snags, those dead trees. Now, obviously, you don't want to leave a dead tree where it's going to fall on your house or your neighbor. If you've got enough property that you can leave those snags at the back of your property so they can do what they need to do. And as they decompose, the insects are going to work on them, and then the birds are going to come for the insects. I witnessed 3 different species of woodpecker living in the same declining water oak in one spring. So they can, coexist. And then after the woodpeckers move out, other birds can move in. Here we have a great crested flycatcher with a baby, probably a nest of babies in the nest in an old woodpecker hole. So many different types of birds and other animals as well use those cavities. Sparrows, so not house sparrows, they can live at Walmart, but real sparrows, like the fox sparrow, the white-throated sparrow, the white-crowned sparrow, et cetera, that may nest way, way up north in North America, but come down to the Gulf South for winter. They're gonna, when they show up in our yards, they need a place to eat, a place to hide. Sparrows like to be in low shelters, and so these brush piles are wonderful for protection and forage for all different sorts of sparrows and wrens. We have these storms that come through. Instead of piling up that pile of brush and putting it out by the street to be taken to the landfill, if you've got enough space, find an out-of-way corner in the back of your yard and put it back there. It's going to decompose. If you don't do anything to it, it'll be completely gone in 2 years. But in the process, it's going to provide a lot of good for wildlife. And again, if you've got enough space and you can leave the tangles and the thickets, the overgrown areas in your yard, you have birds like these 2, the eastern towhee and brown thrasher, that will absolutely love you for it. Leaving the leaves, this is getting a lot of airplay lately. So many of our insects overwinter in the fallen leaves, and we just package all that up and put it in a trash bag and send it to the landfill instead of leaving it where it lies, where it can decompose, provide value to the soil, but also provide value to insects and also to birds in the meantime. So just raking those leaves back up under the tree or under shrubs and letting it decompose is a wonderful thing to do. You may find that you have new birds in your yard because you've left the leaves that you never would have seen if you break them all up and sent them away. We also, I think, as gardeners need to think about, if we plant plants that are appropriate to the place, it also becomes, we get that sense of place and we get that sense of cycle of the seasons, which is kind of tough to do here in the South because we don't have as much seasonal variety in weather, but certainly we have seasonal variety in plants. And if we leave some of these plants through the seasons, then we get a sense of the fact that it's fall and then it's winter and then it's spring and then it's summer. And it really does add to that, that whole aesthetic. Here we have purple coneflower that set seed. And if we were to cut all this down, all those seeds are not available to reproduce and also as food for birds. Of course, just because a plant is native does not automatically make it great. A perfect example is a water oak. Water oaks grow very nicely around here. They say that water oak lives about 70 years. It takes 30 years to grow and 40 years to die. And those big heavy limbs can cause a lot of damage when they come down. So you do have to do your homework and figure out what will be valuable and right for your yard. And does this mean that then you have to rip out every non-native and put in something native in your yard and garden? Of course not. But you can transition. So when you're adding something new or replacing something, choose a native. So when I moved to my new house in Ponchatoula 4 years ago, there was this one very sad Japanese magnolia in the middle of the lawn. So I removed that. I've now created this bed, which is ever expanding. Don't tell my husband. And so far I've added Texas star hibiscus, Joe Pye weed, a tai tree, red canna, porterweed, that is a non-native but a wonderful plant for hummingbirds and butterflies. Acrinum, Louisiana iris, and bog sage, which is also loved by hummingbirds. So I have a variety of natives. And in the late summer, when all this grows up, the butterflies and the hummingbirds just buzz around this one little area in my yard. You do have to make a plan. You can't just throw out weed seeds and expect everything to look wonderful. We unfortunately have way too many exotic foreign plants that are just going to take over and eat the space. So just like with an ornamental garden, you do have to plan for season interest. You are going to have to do some maintenance as far as weeding to keep things in line. So it's not going to be completely maintenance free. So where are you going to find these plants? Well, it's not as easy as you would think. Nurseries really don't carry them. They're so focused on ornamental plants. If they do carry them, it's almost an accident, and you're going to have to know what you're looking for. They can also trick you. So there may be cultivars. You find a Ilex vomitoria, which is on your list as a native plant, and then you find that these particular cultivars are all male, and they're never going to produce berries. So they're going to be little green meatballs forever, but not provide a lot of value as far as insects and birds. There is a variety now that is female that does provide berries. So as far as sources for native plants, so we've created a page on the Baton Rouge Audubon webpage called Native Plant Guide. And basically, I've compiled all of the information that I've been able to find so far on sources for native plants into one page. I'm constantly adding to this. So if you find that you have opportunity, or if you know of
so dog food.
get native plants, then please do let me know so that I can add it to this page. And of course, one of the best sources in the Baton Rouge area for native plants is Hilltop Arboretum. So the hodgepodge at Hilltop sells plants year round, and they will mark the ones that are native. They normally have the twice annual plant sales that features many natives. Of course, this year things have been a little bit different with COVID, but they just had a wonderful fall sale and offered many, many different natives. And for this event, Hilltop has stocked some native plants that are specifically focused on attracting birds. So you should have received an email with details, and you'll be receiving some follow-up emails as well with details about ordering these plants. But these plants will be available over the next couple of weeks, and you'll pick them up. You'll order them online and then pick them up at Hilltop. And that the list that was provided in the email in your invitation to this session, we've identified several plants that are available from the nurseries right now. As I mentioned before, the oak trees are wonderful hosts for moths and butterflies, which in turn turn into opportunity for bird food. And these oaks that are listed today are great for our home landscapes, unlike the water oak. So isn't that a wonderful acorn? I looked up the photo of this overcup acorn. I didn't ever realize how it got its name, but it covered the cap actually covers the acorn completely. And oak trees, you look at Baton Rouge from an aerial perspective, and then you kind of map where many of the bird sightings, especially things like winter hummingbirds, are focused in the Baton Rouge area. And you find that the garden district is very, very productive as far as bird life is concerned. And one of the reasons for that is because all of the live oaks in the garden district. So, well, oaks are king. A tree like the native persimmon can provide fruit for wildlife. This one is an understory tree. It prefers drier conditions. So if you have an area that doesn't get as much water, certainly not one that is in standing water, this might be a tree for you. It provides that fall interest. So after the leaves have gone, the fruit stays on the tree. It also has a deep root system so that you can underplant with shrubs and things. It is dioecious, so it does require male and female to get the fruit. And then of course the fruit persists in the fall. The red buckeye, this is one of my favorites. This is a wonderful tree for the ruby-throated hummingbird. It actually starts blooming at the same time that the ruby-throated hummingbird is returning from Central America in March and April. Sometimes it's listed as a shrub. It can be anywhere from 10 to 40 feet, but you can certainly limit up into a small tree. It'll start producing flowers when it's just a few feet tall. So I've started it from seed and have it started it from seed in the fall and had flowers the next spring. It does lose its leaves early in the summer, kind of the July, August-ish time frame. So you do want to place it in your garden so that it's, it'll be the showstopper in spring and then kind of blend into the background in the fall. If it does produce seeds, they're a very large seed. To propagate them, of course, you can start them in a pot, but you can also just put the seed on the ground and step it into the soil, and usually they will germinate. Parsley Hawthorne is a very attractive large shrub or small tree. The leaf actually looks like our flat leaf parsley and produces these beautiful white flowers in the spring and thousands of berries in the fall, which are loved by all sorts of birds. These can grow in wetter areas. So this might be a mid-border plant in a sunny spot or under very large trees in high shade. Mayhaw, similar to the parsley haw as far as location, but it actually will tolerate locations that tend to stay wetter and possibly have less sun. Again, a 25 to 30 foot tall understory tree. The fruit ripens in May to June, so the birds will go after it then, and you may be able to pick a few for yourself and make some mayhaw jelly, which is just wonderful. One of my favorite jellies. Dehewn holly, Ilex cassine, can be an ornamental plant, a specimen plant. Small tree, 20 to 30 feet high, also grows in part shade and moist soil. This is one of the evergreen hollies where the flowers are inconspicuous, but the fruit can be yellow or bright red and can last all the way through the winter. Black cherry, I love this tree, just love this tree. This tree, so you see the bark there when it's young, it has this horizontal pattern to it. It's really easy to pick out in the forest actually, even when it's not in flower or in fruit. It is monoecious, so it does not require a male and female. It does start blooming and producing fruit when it's quite young. It can grow in sun or as an understory, and has these beautiful panicles of white flowers in the spring, and birds just go crazy for these fruit in this tree. This is another one that people traditionally will pick the fruit to make cherry bounce, but I'm just going to leave mine for the birds. Red maple. So we have a couple of different varieties here. We have the red maple that grows in a drier area, and then which is the one that Peggy has for sale, Acer rubrum. There's also a swamp maple that you'll see growing out in our swamps. Here's a northern Perula warbler in a maple tree in the swamp. So this is going to provide slightly acid, moist soils. I have a maple tree out in my side yard, and I've probably seen 12 or 15 different species of birds just in that tree. So it really has been a magnet in my yard. Sweet gum. So sweet gums will grow 75 feet generally in our yards. It may grow taller in the wild, depending on the location if it really likes it. It's pretty fast growing. It provides great fall color for us in the South, which is a great thing. And it is deciduous, of course, and we're all, I think, familiar with the seed balls, which a lot of people will cuss if they have to walk through them at any time, but they are a great source of food for a variety of birds. Everybody wants to know when the goldfinches are coming to their feeders. Well, before they come to our feeders, they're all up in the sweet gum trees eating the seeds left over in the seed balls. So once those seed balls are gone, then they might show up at our feeders. So the seed balls, you can rake them up, back up under the tree, leave them there for food. They'll be much appreciated. The southern magnolia, stately, ornamental, but also provides great value ecologically in our landscapes. So it can get up to about 50 feet, possibly higher if it really likes the spot. It does tend to cast very dark shade, but if you just rake the leaves back up under the tree, then you don't have to worry about those thick leaves covering up other things. And a whole variety of birds. This is one that's listed on Bill Fontenot's report. A whole variety of birds eat the seeds of the southern magnolia. Here's a cardinal and a mockingbird. Had eastern kingbird in my yard eating these. All the woodpeckers love southern magnolias. Pine trees are immensely valuable in our landscapes. There are many varieties that do well in our area. Of course, birds will nest in them and forage in them for seeds and insects. Here's a pine warbler, which is associated with pine trees, of course, and a brown-headed nuthatch. And then pine needles are an ideal garden mulch. So you can certainly rake the pine needles back up under the pine trees, but you can also rake them up and use them as mulch in other areas of your yard as well. Wonderful shrub, the American beautyberry. This one is generally 3 to 5 feet tall, but can reach 9 to 10 feet in ideal conditions. And if you visited Hilltop Arboretum, you can see extraordinary examples of the American beautyberry. That some of the shrubs there are, 10 feet tall and 10 feet across. That's the only ones I've ever seen that big. Usually in the forest, they're in the 3 to 5 foot tall. And you can cut these back in the fall to encourage a more compact growth. So you can kind of manage the shape of these plants. The flowers, I have a photo of on the left I took in my yard this spring. They're pretty inconspicuous because it's the fruit, these wonderful purple berries that are very striking and visible in the fall, late summer and into the fall. So this is a great understory plant that grows in a variety of soils. Airwood Viburnum. So just a comment about viburnums. There are several viburnums on the market that are available, and many of them are Chinese, are foreign. So you do want to make sure that the variety that you're looking at is one that is native to North America. This is a great one, Viburnum dentatum. Very tolerant of most soil types and exposures. This is a very forgiving plant. Generally stays 6 to 8 feet tall. It is deciduous, it's monoecious, so a male and female are not required. And it grows with these beautiful clusters of flowers in the spring that then turn into berries in the summer and the fall. So I have a note there when I was researching these, I saw that they contain 41% fat. And you think, well, why is that important? Well, our migratory birds that have to travel for literally thousands of miles, it's essential that they add body weight so that they can make these long trips. So they need plants, sorry, they need fuel that's high in fat, because the fat burns more slowly as a fuel than sugar does. So we have, there are plants like the Chinese privet and other plants that do provide, we find that birds will eat, but many of them are very high in sugar content and not fat content. So just like with humans, that's going to be short-term, fast-burning fuel. It's not going to sustain them and support them over the long haul as they migrate on their journeys to Central and South America or north to the upper parts of North America. So these native plants that have foods that are very high in fat, poison ivy and Virginia creeper are two other plants that produce berries that are very lipid rich and very important for migratory birds. Buttonbush is another favorite shrub. So this is a multi-stemmed woody deciduous shrub, so it's going to lose its leaves in the fall, grows 6 to 12 feet tall, kind of an arching habit, if you will. It's great kind of mid-story in the landscape, and has these wonderful sort of disco ball flowers that last a long time. They are pollinator favorites. You will find all kinds of bees and other insects that are using these flowers. Hummingbirds will visit these flowers as well. They last a long time. And after the flower dries up, the seeds or nutlets persist on the plants through the fall and the winter and provide food for those seasons as well. And here's a Carolina chickadee taking advantage of the seeds of the buttonbush. So this one grows best in wet areas with part shade. You can see it out in its native habitat, kind of on the edges of swamps. The dwarf blueberry, I love this plant. So if you're looking for a replacement for something that doesn't grow too tall, kind of has that rounded shape, this might be the one for you. It has this wonderful sort of bluish green, almost pinkish foliage at different times of the year. It'll have a bell-like flower in the spring and then bluish fruit in the summer. It does prefer acidic soil. So if you are one that, if you have pine trees, if you have azaleas, that kind of thing, then you know that your soil is acidic, and these would be appropriate. Another one also in the Vaccinium, the blueberry family, is the Huckleberry, Vaccinium Eliatai. This can be kind of a somewhat irregular shaped shrub that's great for like mid-border. Can grow up to about 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide. Has these beautiful, very subtle, almost rainbow colored flower that appear in the spring and then produces a tart berry. Also likes the acidic soil. Great understory plant near pine trees. That's where you're going to find it in nature. The strawberry bush. This is kind of an airy deciduous shrub that can grow 6 to 12 feet tall. I find it very slow growing in my yard. I've had it since my first fall here, and mine are still, very small. That's been now going on 4 years. So it grows as an understory in light shade. You might need to fill in with other leafy plants, but these seed pods are the thing. That's the reason to plant this plant with these wonderful, unusual seed pods. I have read that these are very attractive to deer. So if you have deer in your area, you'll either be feeding them or you'll be passing them as they as they eat all of your strawberry bush. The winged sumac, shining or winged sumac, is a large shrub or small tree. I generally see it in the area of maybe 12 feet tall at the max. It does provide great fall color and has kind of an unusual shape, sort of very vertical shape. It'd be interesting to work into a landscape. The yellowish flowers are not very conspicuous. It has this cluster of drooping fruits, which also persist through the winter. And this one likes the dry, poorer soils. You can see this one a lot along roadsides, which you know take a lot of abuse. Texas star hibiscus, it's listed under shrubs. I almost would put this in more of the perennial category. It does grow on kind of a woody stem, but in my experience, it dies back to the ground and starts new shoots every spring that generally just grow straight up for 8 or 10 feet before it starts producing flowers. My stems, I've had problems with them flopping over and breaking, so I've had to provide some support or cut them back so that they don't get quite as tall, and then they can start producing the flowers on a shorter stem. And they'll just keep blooming over a long period of time, like many things in the hibiscus family. So they are attractive to hummingbirds and to butterflies. They will produce lots of seed pods for you so that you can share them with friends or create a little grove of Texas star hibiscus, which would be really attractive because the flowers, you know, each stem, each stalk may only produce a flower at a time. If you had a grouping, then it would be quite spectacular. Turks Cap, love this plant. It's one of the most prolific bloomers in a fairly shaded area. If you have oak trees, for example, as long as the shade is not too dense, the Turks Cap will grow and bloom. In our area, it generally dies back in the winter time. You can control the size and the shape of the plant by cutting it back. It blooms for a very long period of time. It's attractive to birds, to hummingbirds, to butterflies. It produces a fruit that other birds will eat as well. I've seen mockingbirds eat the fruit. And will bloom all the way until we get a really hard frost. So this is one that should be a must-have in every yard. And there are 3 different varieties. So we have the one that is pictured here, the Hibiscus arboretus Viburnum, which has a small flower with the stamen coming up out of the flower. There's a medium-sized flower called Big Mama that is available at Hilltop often. It's a cross between this one, the small Turks Cap, and the giant Turks Cap. And then the giant Turks Cap is one that has, it looks like a hibiscus flower that never opened. So it's kind of drooping down. Mine is all in full bloom right now, which is kind of past the hummingbird peak. But I have a rufous hummingbird in my yard right now that is loving the giant Turks Cap. And our winter visitors like the orange-crowned warbler will like the giant Turks Cap. So there certainly is value in having it in your yard. We have the Itea virginica, Virginia willow or Virginia sweet spire is a shrub that kind of has a mounding shape. This is a deciduous shrub that provides great fall color. There's a cultivar called Henry's Garnet that tends to be more compact, and it has this wonderful rusty color in the fall. And it may actually be semi-evergreen in mild winters, which is often the case around here. So it does provide, it does prefer acidic soil and part shade, like many of the other plants that I've mentioned so far. But this is a great one to feature in kind of in the front of the border in your yard. Yaupon, Ilex vomitoria. So anything in the Ilex family is going to be great for birds. That's just a fact. Yaupon is one that generally grows to a large shrub or a small tree, max about 20 feet high. It can grow in part shade, so you'll find this kind of as an understory in nature. It is evergreen. And then like most other hollies, it has a tiny inconspicuous flower, but the fruit will persist for a long time, makes great Christmas decorations. It is dioecious, so you do need male and female. But the nice thing about this one is that there are generally enough yaupons around our areas that you may not need to put both of them in your yard, because the males may be out there somewhere close to you, so that all you need is a female to have the berries. Interestingly, this is the only native plant that contains caffeine. It can actually be used to make a tea. So if you run out of coffee, you can just go outside and get some yaupon and make yourself some tea. Do note that this plant does look very similar to Chinese privet as far as the leaves go. If you look closely, though, you'll see that the yaupon leaves are alternate. The privet is opposite, and that's a good way to tell it apart. So when you're trying to remove Chinese privet out of your yard, you'll know that you're removing the privet and not the yaupon. Now some perennials that we might be interested in. This is a wonderful one, purple coneflower. I can't stop taking pictures of purple coneflower. I just love the composite intricacy of these flowers. They're fairly easy to grow from seed, so you can start them in pots. You can even seed them directly into the garden. You want to be careful when you go to the nursery and you find that something is labeled as Echinacea purpurea. But there are many cultivars now that are in different colors, some that have double flowers or triple flowers, and sometimes those are the value to insects, to pollinators, is bred right out of them. So you want to be careful. If you can find this species, that'll be the best one as far as nature is concerned. And once these get established in your yard, they will return annually. They bloom for a long time. And then, as I was talking about earlier, they can provide fall and winter interest with the flower heads, the seed heads, that also provide food for goldfinches, buntings, sparrows. You may, have a painted bunting show up in your yard in your purple coneflower patch in the spring. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Red salvia, Salvia Coxenia. Love this plant. Cannot get enough of this. This is a hummingbird magnet. It has very high sugar content in the flowers. It's a tender perennial or self-seeding annual here in Louisiana. As it blooms, it produces these seed heads. You can just pinch off the seed head, spread it around in your yard. It'll grow practically in a crack in the sidewalk. It's easy to save the seeds and grow next year. It grows in light shade, so this is great for those areas, kind of the edges under trees and that kind of thing. Just kind of fills in everywhere in my yard. Swamp sunflower. You basically can't go wrong with anything in the Helianthus family. Now, swamp sunflower, I will have to say, spreads very easily in moist soil. This is my backyard. I started with 3 plants. This is the 3rd summer, okay? So I made them, well, I didn't know, but so I just let them grow the first year, and the second year, last summer, they grew to 12 feet and they flocked everywhere. So on Bill Fontenot's suggestion, in July, right around the 4th of July, They were about maybe head high, so maybe 5.5 feet tall. And I cut them back to 2 feet tall in July and then let them grow back. And they bloomed profusely starting in September all the way through October. And they were only about 6, maybe 7 feet tall at that point, so they didn't have the tendency to fall all over the place, which was very nice. So it made a real statement, but it didn't look too wild with everything flopping everywhere. And he suggested that with other things like some of the species of goldenrod, ironweed, Joe Pye weed, just cut them back to kind of force them to remain a little more compact. So my plan is to leave all these seed heads for the winter, and I'll just pay attention out there to what's using the spent sunflowers, and I'll be able to report back. And another great one, this is another Rudbeckia, giant coneflower. This one also makes a statement. This wonderful plant grows up to 6 feet tall. Best to grow it in mass so that it kind of fills in a space. Maybe it might need a little bit of support if you've got a fence or something to grow it close to. Wonderful for the flowers for pollinators and also the seeds for birds. Scarlet bee balm. This particular variety, Jacob Klein, is one that is more mildew resistant because this is a plant that does sometimes succumb to mildew. Tends to grow in clumps, and where it likes the location, it will just take off and makes an exceptional both ornamental and useful plant in the landscape. So those are the plants that are available for the plant sale. You'll find as you get into this that there just aren't enough sources. You want more plants. And really it's up to us to create that demand so that the growers and the retailers stock the plants that we want so that we can grow them in our yard. So we need to keep asking these questions. Rick Webb at Louisiana Growers would love to sell more native plants to the nursery outlets across the state, but that demand has to be there because in the end it's a business and they've got to earn a living. So it really needs to be this grassroots in the truest sense of the word efforts. And once things get going in your yard, once things are working, then let us know what's working for you, how plants are growing in your yard, if you've got things that are successful, if you have birds that show up. This is one of the reasons that I created the Plants for Birds in Louisiana Facebook page, so that people could post their photos and their stories about what birds are using the plants in their yards. So that people could see what they're bringing in. And then the more of us that do this, we can share propagation stories, we can share cuttings and seeds with friends so that we can increase this. Share on social media. Here's a wonderful photo of a summer tanager that Tammy took in her yard in the spring in her little native garden. So the more we share these stories, I think the more draw that there will be by the public toward these wonderful things. Native Plant Societies, we have the statewide Louisiana Native Plant Society, and then in the different areas, in Baton Rouge area, Capital Area Native Plant Society, in Lafayette, Acadiana Native Plant Project, and in Acadia and Arnaudville, where they have their greenhouse, they've also created a demo garden over there. And I think Phyllis is on this call and she maybe can talk about that. And then New Orleans, the New Orleans Native Plant Initiative is going great guns, creating native plant gardens at City Park in New Orleans so that the people can see the value of native plants in their garden. So it's really essential I think, to share information with societies like this. So in summary, will you have birds in your yard if you don't put any native plants? Absolutely. Every other yard has a mockingbird in it, and mockingbirds will nest in a crepe myrtle tree or in an azalea, as will a cardinal. So certainly there are plants, non-native plants, that will attract birds to our yard. But if you add those native plants, you'll find that you're going to increase the diversity of the bird life in your yard exponentially. And that's what it's all about. All right, I'm going to leave this page up for a second, and then we will, I'll let you unmute yourselves if you have a question, and I'll also look at the chat box to see if there are questions that I can answer. All right. Are there resources for planning a yard that can accommodate more territorial species? I've had problems with jays. I love corvids, want them to stay, but I'd like for the more timid birds to also feel comfortable. So you're not gonna exclude the jays. They're gonna come. As far as crows, which would be the other problem, corvid, if you stay away from things like offering corn, then generally the crows are not going to be attracted to your yard. But blue jays they like to nest in larger trees, oaks, and things like that. If you put out bird seed, they're going to come in and eat it, especially if you put out peanuts, because they love those. But basically, the more variety that you have as far as plants in your yard, you have the trees, you have the mid-story, you have the perennials in your border. You're going to find that the smaller birds are definitely going to be there, and you may not notice them as much because certainly blue jays are easier to see than the other smaller birds. But those other ones will be there as well. Can all these plants be put in the ground now, or should we plan to overwinter some of them in pots? I think everything that Peggy has for sale can be put in the ground now. In fact, fall is a better time to plant trees and shrubs because the roots can get established in the fall, and then it can start producing new growth in the spring. Will this PowerPoint be available? Yes, I'm recording it so that it will be available on the Baton Rouge Audubon YouTube channel. If you get a Yopon holly, how do you know if you have a male or a female? Find one that already has berries on it to know absolutely. Either that, or you'll have to find one that has been labeled by the grower, but you'll want to look for berries. Phyllis said yes. She agrees with me. This is the time to put in woody plants. Recommendations for individuals or companies that do landscape design with native plants. In the Baton Rouge area, as Phyllis said, Helen Peebles, Bill Fontenot will do some consulting. Tammany Baumgarten in the New Orleans area also does some consulting. And then Phyllis, I actually meant to add a slide in my presentation about the certification program of the Louisiana Native Plant Society. So the Louisiana Native Plant Society started a program this last year where they'll certify your yard as habitat, as native habitat, depending on the number of native plant species that you have in your yard. So if you have 50 species or 50% of your yard in natives, then it's the bronze level certification. 75, is that right? 50, 75, 100?
It's, hi, I don't know if you can hear me, Jane?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so we actually it's only 25 species for the
25.
bronze level, 50
Thank you.
species for silver, and 75 or higher for gold. But we've had several people in Baton Rouge who have over 200 species. And so they're asking for platinum. But for now, it's bronze, silver, and gold.
Okay, so 25, 50, 75. So, and that's another thing, you know, you get this certification, you get the plaque, and you put it out in your yard. It's another way to promote the use of native plants to gardeners and also to bird lovers. Teresa says that Almost Eden plants in Maryville. Yes, so Almost Eden is on my Baton Rouge Audubon webpage for native plant sources. They are certainly mentioned. Neighbor from Baton Rouge has an area with native sunflowers, ironweed with bees. Someone informs the city to come and mow it all down. You have a recommendation on how to deal with this. So this is a difficult thing to deal with. And if you're in an area controlled by a homeowners association, it kind of adds another level to this. But I think the key to this is conversation, is communication. So if you talk to whoever is making the complaint and tell them what you're trying to do, if you have the signs out there that specifically say that you're created habitat for birds, for pollinators, you know, that this is purposeful and not just a neglected, a blighted property, then I think that changes the conversation. So I think that is key. And then also, you know, birds would love it to be just totally messy. You know, they're all in favor of that. But we as humans, and especially in our suburbia landscapes, are really not okay about that, with that. And so that's why you have to add some design elements when you're putting in these native plants so that it does look like a planned landscape and not just chaos. And then I think you have a better chance of being successful with things like homeowners associations and city ordinances. So I will let Peggy talk more about the plant sale in just a minute, Lindsay. And then somebody who, suggested that this is a garden. Jim was saying basically the same thing I said about the people that have their yards mowed, that you really just have to have the conversation, let people know that this is actually a planned garden and not just weeds. We're remodeling, won't be able to put everything in the ground, keep them alive in pots. You should be able to overwinter just about everything that is for sale right now in pots, as long as you do water periodically. Don't let things get too dry. You know, if you've got some sheltered locations under trees or the edge of your house where you can keep them out of the coldest areas, you'll probably be fine. All of these are adapted to our area, so they should survive. So, all right, Peggy, do you want to talk a little bit about the plant sale?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Well, tomorrow morning, if you're a member of the Audubon Society or you're a member of the Friends of Hilltop, you will receive an email that will once again include the list of the native trees, shrubs, and perennials, which are the ones that Jane talked about, and some additional ones that will be for sale. The email will have a link in it, and that will give you access to our online store. Once you order the plants, we'll follow up with you to let you know that your plants have been pulled and ready for you to pick up. We typically put them in a wagon outside the kitchen side of the Arboretum and put your name on it so that they're ready for you to pick up. We ask that if you can possibly do it, to pick them up in a couple of days, and we will run the sale up through is it Friday, November 20th, and then the 23rd would be the last day that you could pick up your plants. So we have piloted selling plants, contactless plant sales, ever since COVID struck back in March, and it works very well. So I encourage you to purchase these plants. We bought them from Rick Webb, Louisiana Growers and Amy, and from Margie Ann Jenkins at Jenkins Farm and Nursery. And these are two fabulous growers of native plants for our area. So please take advantage of this opportunity. We've really brought in a good number of plants, and it would be a great time for you to get them planted in your yards. Give the root systems time to get going in the fall and through the winter, since we have such typically mild falls and winters. So I look forward to seeing some of you at Hilltop. So we'll send those links to you tomorrow morning.
Great. Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I do want to mention too, the Baton Rouge Audubon Society, we have a presentation next Thursday that is going to be along these same lines, but of a more scientific bent, because our presenter is Dr. Desiree Narango, who is one of Dr. Talamy's researchers. So she is one of the ones that actually helped to create the data that he uses in his books. The title of her program is Why Plants Matter for Wildlife. Why Plants Matter for Wildlife Conservation in Human-Dominated Landscapes, which is another way of why planting native plants for birds and other wildlife. But please do join us. The links will be on the Baton Rouge Audubon Facebook page. We should be broadcasting it on Facebook Live on the Baton Rouge Audubon Facebook page, as well as Zoom. And you can also join our mailing list so that we can inform you when we have other programs. Are there any other questions or comments from anybody? Don, I see your hands up.
Very good, Jane. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome, John. Thank you. All right. I'm going to stop sharing this now. Go back here. All right, last chance. Any other questions, comments?
Great program.
Well, thank you all for joining. We had about 75 people, 78 people at our max. So that was great. And we sure appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.